The truth does not come crashing in like some cowboy in a western. Truth steps forward the way a weary actor does after the final curtain, stripped of costume, stripped of pretense, carrying only the weight of what is real. And you can feel that moment settling over rural America like a heavy southern dusk, the kind that presses against the windows and makes the walls sweat. In those quiet kitchens where the wallpaper faded years before the youngest child was born, mothers sit with their elbows on the table and whisper numbers under their breath, hoping that the math will show mercy this time. And fathers stare into coffee turning cold with that hollow ache behind the eyes that comes when strength has run out of places to go. These are homes that have weathered droughts and tornadoes and bad harvests and heartbreaks, but the fear rising now is different. It's quieter. It sneaks in like a draft beneath the door, the fear that even if you work, even if you do everything right, the country might still let you drown. Insurance premiums rise relentlessly now that subsidies have been stripped away, and it feels like someone has taken the floorboards out from under families who have carried this country on their shoulders for centuries. These are not people asking for special favors. These are people asking only to live, to breathe, to raise their children without bargaining with catastrophe. But the numbers on those insurance bills climb higher and higher, cold and indifferent, as if mocking the simple decency of working people who believe that effort should still mean something. And Republicans shuffle around this crisis pretending to be startled by the fire they've built. They look upon the burning rafters as if the flames were summoned by sorcery and not by legislation written in boardrooms, far from anywhere cotton grows. But this blaze is not mystical. It is not accidental. It is the predictable outcome of a philosophy that worships the market like a jealous god, a god that demands sacrifice from the poor and tribute from the sick. They've insisted for decades that health care belonged in the hands of profit makers. They hollowed out subsidies, weakened protections, slashed stabilizers, and told families to pray to the altar of competition, as if competition could stop a stroke, as if choice could cure cancer, as if freedom could silence a medical bill that arrives like a funeral procession. Maybe they believed the suffering they engineered would fall on someone else, on strangers, on cities they never intended to visit, on nameless faces far outside their districts. Maybe they believed their own voters would be insulated by the myth of self-reliance and the illusion of employer coverage. But illness does not care about illusions. A diagnosis does not respect political loyalties, and medical debt does not ask whom you voted for. And now the storm they conjured has come home. And working families in the reddest counties in America are discovering that Republican policies are not designed to protect them. It was designed to take from them. Rural counties with a single insurer being bled dry. Farmers who once believed they would die on their land now lay awake wondering if they will lose everything to a hospital bill. Older couples that are too young for Medicare now watch premiums rise like floodwaters. Full-time workers with children who need round-the-clock medical care are learning that private insurance does not cover enough and Medicaid is being gutted beneath them. Republicans built a system on the fantasy that their own voters would never feel the pain, or worse, and this is the bitter truth, that they did know. They knew exactly who would suffer and still chose their donors over their districts. Because donor money whispers louder than any rural mother crying in a hospital waiting room. Because the wealthiest corporations in the healthcare labyrinth, the insurers, the hospital chains, the pharmaceutical giants, they will never sit at a kitchen table and wonder how to keep the lights on. Cutting subsidies is profitable. Cutting Medicaid is profitable. Weakening protections is profitable, and profit for them is policy. And if that fact does not tell you who matters and who does not, then nothing ever will. But Medicaid is where the cruelty becomes unmistakable. People imagine Medicaid as a distant program for distant people, never realizing that Medicaid is the backbone holding up families who work full-time and still cannot cover the cost of complex medical needs. Medicaid pays for the private duty nurses who accompany medically fragile children into public schools, ensuring that they can learn and live beside their peers. Medicaid funds feeding therapies, speech therapies, occupational therapies, and life-saving interventions that private insurance dismisses as optional luxuries. Cut Medicaid and you do not cut fat. You cut the first breath a child takes in the morning. You cut the ability of a parent to stay in the workforce. You cut the capacity of a school to serve its most vulnerable students. You cut the quiet promise that civilization makes to its children. And while these children fight, the broader economic truth stands in the background like the shadow of a giant, because Medicaid cuts hurt the entire economy. When families lose support and parents are forced to leave the workforce, when rural hospitals close from lost federal funding, communities lose their largest employers. When children cannot attend school safely, entire districts lose stability. When families drown in medical debt, they stop spending locally, they stop investing, they stop moving upward. Healthcare policy is economic policy. You cannot destabilize one without destabilizing the other. And that is the part the donor class understands perfectly. Because economic instability keeps people desperate, and desperation is politically profitable. A struggling worker has no time to fight. A bankrupt family cannot organize. A mother whose child is fighting for every breath does not have the luxury of becoming a political threat. But something is shifting. Something deep and old and electric is waking up in the marrow of this country. People are beginning to see the truth as it actually is, not as it is packaged, polished, and sold. They are seeing that they are not failing. The system was designed to fail them. They are seeing that this pain is not an accident, it was chosen. And when a people realize their suffering was engineered, they begin to find the strength to engineer justice in return. And maybe this is where the reckoning begins. Maybe this is where the southern sky goes dark and then explodes with thunder, the way it does before a summer storm that breaks the heat and brings the world back to life. Maybe this is where the mothers who've carried their children through nights spent in hospitals rise as a force no money can control. Maybe this is where fathers who have stood silent for too long finally speak. Maybe this is where the working class finds its voice again, not in anger alone, but in clarity. Because the truth is simple and it is powerful. A child's life is worth more than a billionaire's dividend. A family's survival is worth more than a donor's check. A nation's future is worth more than the convenience of the powerful. And when ordinary people finally accept that truth, when they stand up together, when they refuse to be sacrificed for someone else's profit, then the storm truly begins, and it will not be gentle. It will shake the rafters of government. It will roll across the plains and farmlands and city streets. It will thunder in every direction until every lawmaker hears the truth ringing through the bones of this nation. That the people are awake now. The people are rising now, and no amount of money will save the ones who chose cruelty over care. Defiance till death.